It's just city park pool. It's open on 7 o'clock on the weekends.
Yeah. There's a lot of
I like to try to check them all out when I'm out of town. I know of one in Washington D.C. It's really nice.
Oh, really?
Definitely getting that one. Yeah. It's at colleges. It's at one of the colleges.
Is it open early or late, or what time is it open?
6, I think. Yeah, so you can get it in.
Right.
It's either 5:30 or 6. Yeah.
You're going to do more than that. My high school that's right by me, they did have a small swim club there. Versus something happened. They took the swim club out. And the swim club was opening it up for hours for public use during the hours they were already running. They help supplement their rental.
Exactly.
And then you take their money out. It's like, I've been meeting up on our school board and said, hey, we got to get that back open again. We got to figure this out. I thought there was a personal need.
Not that I have any personal.
Yeah.
In fact, it's right around the corner. But the pool that my kids, where my kids swim, they're repairing it, so it's been draining for like 2 or 3 weeks now. So they have also been in the water too much.
All right, Judith. Yes, she is. All right. I know you are. Well, she asked if I'd wait, and I said yes, so she is. Okay. Then you're stuck. Yeah. Mosen, you're all ready to go? Whenever you are. All right. Yeah. I told Judith I'd wait. She wanted to go to bed. Not hanging out the hallway.
Yeah, I have probably won't go now anyhow. Thank you. Sure. Okay.
Switch this one over. Good luck. So we don't beat this
Sure, just take it. I oh, okay, good. Okay.
Just have a short question here.
Sure.
What were the considerations going
I
on?
only have one item, but you can wait. Oh, we do? Well, no. Yeah, we gotta wait for Judith.
Was there any thoughts about filing sooner than that?
I think ours was one of the first lawsuits actually to get filed. Usually one of the considerations is whether the violation has been terminated. Right? You don't really know what kind of penalty
Yeah,
until you know how extensive it is.
Yeah, the only one I
The penalties are daily penalties. So That was.
All right, just a minor question.
Sure, no.
Yeah, right.
Which I thought might happen on this one.
Yes, I'm driving the doctor on that. We should have a private audience. We're in the same room, what just that into this. She says, well, what are you going to do? He gets time with her. And I'm like, since I have an invisibility cloak on, I keep walking, but it's weird.
It's from Riverside.
Why didn't you say hi? She had a visibility cloak on.
All right, now I'll go ahead and call the Stationary Source Committee meeting to order. First item is informational item. Mosen, go right ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, board members and audience there. I'm going to have a brief presentation on Southern California Gas Company's underground gas storage facilities. This is a follow-up to the request that Supervisor Antonovich made at the last board meeting, the one before last board meeting, and we are also going to take this back to the full board on the next June board meeting. Just for a FYI, the presentation was sent out a week ago, and since then, Gas Company looked at it and gave me some updates about information that we gathered from the DOGGR website. So I've called this a revised, and I'll tell you where the changes were. But it was sent out again, and it's posted on our website. In California, there's a number of oil and gas production sites. Just to give you an idea, if you look at this map, you can see that the majority, the green is oil production and the red is gas production, and then there are a few geothermal in orange. But you can see that the majority of oil production is in Southern California, Central and Southern California, and then the gas production is mostly in the northern part of the state. And when you look at the area a little closer for Los Angeles region, you can see that the oil production is pretty much spread out in urban areas. It's not isolated like in San Joaquin to non-urbanized areas. So looking at the underground storage tank facilities, the gas company, Southern California Gas, has 5 sites in Southern California. The first that you're all familiar with is the Aliso Canyon, which is the site that had the leak, and it's right up around the area where the 405 and 5 and 118 freeways meet. It's kind of like in the center of this diagram. And that's the largest of the underground storage sites. It has the capacity of 88 billion cubic feet of gas storage. Had operated with 129 active wells, and the wells are used for 2 reasons. They're both injecting gas into the underground and for withdrawing it. So they're kind of like a two-way street. And then for the second facility, which is the Montebello site, and that's to the right of Los Angeles, that's a facility that has relatively a smaller quantity of capacity, 14 billion cubic feet per day, but I'm sorry, billion cubic feet. And I'll talk about it a little more. That site has actually been closed down in terms of storage. They're not injecting gas into that site anymore. The third one is below Santa Monica. It's called Playa del Rey, and that site is actually the smallest of the capacities. And then the fourth one is the Honor Ranch, which is way up north in this map. And that has the second largest capacity of the 5 sites that SoCal Gas operates in Southern California. The last one, the La Golita, is actually in Santa Barbara County, so it's not within South Coast AQMD's jurisdiction. And that's the third largest capacity in terms of storage of the 5. So let's start with Aliso. As you very well know, this used to be an oil and gas production site back in the 30s, and in early 70s, the gas company purchased the site and began storing natural gas underground. It does have 116 injection withdrawal, 5 observation, and 8 water injection wells. The water injection wells are when they pull the gas out, because it used to be an oil field, there is still some liquid that comes up with it, and they separate the liquid before they put the gas back into the pipeline, and that water is injected back into the ground. And they have a number of permits with the district, as listed here. They have heaters, gas turbine, IC engines, storage tanks, and flare and other types of units that requires permits from us. And that area in the red is actually the whole site. It's a very large site, and as you can see, the Porter Ranch neighborhood is directly below that red rectangle. The history, as you may recall, on October 23rd last year, gas company detected a leak, and immediately the next day we started getting complaints. So we were out there the next day responding to complaints, and we began taking samples at the community level and the site on the 26th, 3 days after the leak. And on the November 5th, since the leak didn't stop, we issued a notice to comply to gas company to abate the release of mercaptans, which was the main odorant that the community was complaining about. And that's the odorant that the gas company actually adds into the gas to make sure when there's a leak, everybody can detect it. And then, since again that didn't stop on the 23rd of November, we issued a gas company notice of violation for creating a public nuisance. Subsequently, we filed a petition on December 10th with the hearing board for an order of abatement. There were 4 days of hearing, January 9, 10, 9, 16, 20th, and then finally on the 23rd, the hearing board approved the order of abatement and issued the order, and the gas company is operating under that order since then. And then following that, again, because the leak wasn't stopping, we filed actually a civil penalty lawsuit against the gas company on January 26th, and that's pending with probably another 60 or 70 lawsuits the gas company has. Give you an idea of the complaints we received prior to October 23rd for the total part of 2015. We only had 8 complaints that had alleged odor or other complaints or quality complaints about Aliso Canyon Gas Company site. And then you can see between October 24th and February 11th, which is officially the date that they plugged the well, but then DOGGR certified it on February 18 that it was actually, the leak has been stopped. So we received this many complaints, and the scale is up to 90 complaints. So you can see on some days we got over 80 complaints. And then after that, we continued to receive complaints. However, the majority of the complaints were related to concerns about gas inside the homes. It was an outdoor type complaints, and sometimes the most recent, for example, complaints that we get from one of the residents is that there is an odorless, colorless toxin in the air that is making me sick. And when we go out there, there's really nothing for us to detect. We're already doing monitoring at this site. So if you look at the facility, though, there is actually other operators at the Aliso Canyon that the entrance to these operators are from the gas company's entrance at Aliso Canyon, but they operate actually oil and gas wells at this site. 2 of them are operated by Thermo, and 1 of them is Crimson. And there are, generally speaking, if the center part is where the gas company operates, they're generally to the north and northwest of the gas company. And we have done inspections for these facilities, and you can see depending on which site you look at, there's more gas produced compared to oil or vice versa. Some of them get more oil from the reservoir, some of them get more gas coming up. And all the gas that is collected, all the gas that is collected is processed and put back to the gas company's pipeline. We did, just as an FYI, we did find some violations at Thermo that we've taken enforcement action against them. That was due to the one of their production wells had a vent that was directly going into the atmosphere, which is not allowed, and that is being prosecuted in Kurt's office. Aliso has been under our strict scrutiny. We have been, since the closure has taken place, that DOGGR has certified it. We've actually been there every day. We've taken our handheld organic vapor analyzers and taken measurements there. We've taken our portable infrared camera, forward-looking FLIR. And we've also continued our monitoring at and around the community, and gas companies doing an offense line. ARB is also doing monitoring with us. So we are keeping very good track of what's going on. But we also went in and looked at every single well at the site. As you recall, there's 116 injection withdrawal wells and some additional wells. And depending on the day that we visit, we have found some minor leaks from some of these wells or the components there, and we've notified the gas company about those. And they have followed up and repaired some of them, and then the next time we went there, because we're there every day, we visit these wells all the time. So as we find additional leaks, we'll let the gas company know. Montebello is another site that it used to be a oil field extraction by Standard Oil, and in the 1920s it was actually a very large oil field, because about 1/8 of the total state's oil production was coming from this site. And then in the 60s it began to become, because the oil reservoirs depleted, it became more of a natural gas storage site. However, in 2000, the PUC, SoCal Gas filed a petition with PUC to decommission this site due to some of the migration of the gas into the water level, as well as some leaks that was taking place from the site. And 2001 CPUC approved the decommissioning. 280 wells at the site have been permanently sealed. And most of the remaining active wells, they're not able to just pull gas out. When they pull the gas out, it comes up with a lot of liquid, whether it's water and oil, so they have to separate that out. They do have a relatively average, this used to have relative average storage capacity, 14 billion cubic feet. There are a number of wells that are within the facility, but then there's also wells that are outside in the community that they used to operate those. And they do still pump some of the gas and oil out of these wells that are quote-unquote production wells. The majority of them are idle production wells, but there are some. And we do have permits for a number of different types of equipment, including storage tanks, wastewater treating, and flare at this site for afterburner. If you recall, at one of the board meetings, the last couple of meetings, we had a lady who came in and complained about potential leaks in the community. And when you look at the gas wells, you can see it's kind of like the majority of the gas wells. There are some oil wells that are kind of covered by these gas wells. You can't actually see them. So what we did is we took our mobile methane monitor, the LICOR unit, out into the community, And this just shows the inspections we did on 3 different dates, and these yellow lines are the path that the LICOR unit traveled throughout the community to see if we can detect any methane. And we couldn't find any methane with the exception of one spot on the April 15th, which it was actually, in our view, it wasn't related to Montebello gas field. It looked like it was more of a sewer type odor that was coming, and we have identified this not related to Montebello. So when you look at the concentrations of methane, it ranged from almost 2 ppm to 5 ppm max. So it wasn't like really high levels, and the average was about 2 ppm, which is typical background levels that we find everywhere else. We also went into the site and we did inspection of, I apologize, this table may be too small to see, but we inspected on 4 different occasions all of the wells at the site, and we did find that some of the wells did have leaks. They ranged anywhere from a little over 500 ppm all the way to more than 10,000 ppm. And we also took our infrared camera and looked at those leaks with the infrared camera. And when you look at the number of well sites and the number of components that we inspected, on the average about 0.2 component per well site was leaking, depending on different components. We looked at 51 wells. And then we also looked at isolation valves, which these are when they get the gas out, they isolate it and send it to different areas. And we also found about 1/2 of a component per isolation site that was leaking at different rates. And I'll kind of touch base on that. What does that mean in terms of compliance or non-compliance? The next site is the Playa del Rey. This site began oil and gas production in the 1930s. All of these sites used to be oil and gas production, and then once the oil depleted, the reservoir was used to store natural gas underground. And in 40s, they began to store natural gas. There was also some intrusion into the water level, and there was a settlement agreement that was approved by PUC that requires gas company to monitor for gas and subsidence, test the gas and liquid wells, and to limit pressure of the gas, storage gas in certain areas to a limit of 2,400 psi. Now recall when we were dealing with Aliso Canyon, at the peak of their production, they were over 3,500 psi, and now it was dropped down to less than 700. So 2,400 is kind of limiting the maximum pressure in those areas to prevent any intrusion into the water. And they're also required to do some minimization program called, such as odor patrol, planned venting to the community with community notification, and minimizing their other emissions from engines and other operations. Playa del Rey has 54 active wells. 34 of them are on site that are 24 hours, almost half, more than half is injection and withdrawal, and then there are other types of wells, some production, some observation. And then there are 20 within the community. None of those are used for injection withdrawal, but there is one production site, production well. And they have also a number of different types of permitted equipment that are under our permit. When you look at the site, again, you can see the gas wells are the red ones, and there are a few black wells that are oil production sites out there. When we did our inspection at Playa del Rey, we went there 3 days and on 3 different occasions, and we again found some leaks from some of the wells. The average component per well site was about 0.85 that was leaking, and we looked at 54 total wells. And again, when you look at the number of complaints at the bottom, I forgot to mention it for the other sites, we really have not received very many complaints from odors or other type of things at these sites. The last one in our region is on our ranch. This site began production of oil in 1950s, and by 1975, it was converted to oil underground gas storage. This is the second largest in terms of capacity for storage. It's a little over 24 billion cubic feet, and has 28 injection withdrawal wells and 10 withdrawal wells only. They don't use those for injection. And then some other type of wells that are not used for natural gas in general. And they also have a number of permitted equipment at this site that are under our program. So this is what the wells look like again. Majority are gas wells, some oil production wells. And when we did our inspection on our ranch, at this site, we actually found more leaking components per well site, average 3.7. We looked at 46 well sites, and the range of leaks depend on the concentrations that are shown here. In the last year, for example, till today, we have not received any complaints from this site. So we're not identifying these leaks relative to the number of complaints, but this is just using our handheld organic analyzers. So in summary, we have these 4 sites that are within our region, jurisdiction. All 4 of these sites are in NOx reclaim program. And of the 4, 3 of them, all 3 except Montebello, are a Title V source, which means they're a major source as part of our program. Title V requires the permits to be renewed every 5 years, and so I put in the expiration date for these permits. As you can see, for the Playa del Rey in October, their permit expires, so they are going to file a new application. We have to renew that and go to public notice. For the Aliso, it'll be 2018, and for on our ranch, it'll be 2020. Because they are both in reclaim and Title V, we at minimum visit these facilities once a year, but in most cases a lot more than once a year. And we did the more thorough inspections to look at all the well sites in April and May of this year as a request by Supervisor Antonovich. So let me kind of give you an explanation. The natural gas storage sites have historically not been of significant concern for us because methane, first of all, is not a reactive organic gas, so it does not form or help to form ozone, unlike some of the other organic gases. And it wasn't until the recent concerns about greenhouse gas that methane became of a concern. So our, for example, 3 rules that are listed here are dealing with VOC, fugitive emissions, Rule 1173, that applies to volatile organic compounds, but it exempts methane storage facilities from that rule. We have our Rule 1148.1 that controls emissions from oil and gas production sites, and it also has some exemptions from methane. And then our Rule 222, which requires oil and well gas individual wells to be registered under our program, also doesn't apply to this type of well. So what are we going to do? First of all, as you may have heard, ARB is in the midst of proposing new regulations that will apply to oil and gas fields, and they're also including underground storage tanks. They're required to, for both onshore and offshore wells, they're required to have some monitoring, potential monitoring. This hasn't been adopted. It is going to their board in summer of this year. So the proposed rule right now, it seems like, would require some monitoring of the natural gas underground storage facilities, leak detection and repair, or called LDAR, leak detection and repair requirements, and a plan for continuous leak monitoring on the surface and a leak reduction from major catastrophic leaks. The other thing that is going on is, as a result of Aliso Canyon and the state of emergency proclamation that the governor issued last January, DOGGR adopted some. DOGGR is the Division of Geothermal, Gas and Oil Geothermal Resources.
Oil, gas, and geothermal resources.
Thank you. Dr. Liu has been around much longer in this field than I have. They adopted some emergency regulations, and they're also working on some long-term regulation that will significantly revise their existing regs. They would build upon the emergency regs. They're going to have some standards for gas storage project. There'll be some well construction standards. For example, one of the issues that you may have heard from Aliso Canyon is the wells have a center pipe where the gas is injected and withdrawn, but it also has a casing. So the center pipe is like a 3-inch, a little less than 3-inch diameter. The casing is 7-inch diameter. And in some of the sites, they have used both of these so that they can quickly inject or quickly withdraw gas, both the center pipe and the casing. Some of the regs that are going in are going to prohibit use of the casing for injection and withdrawal anymore. And that would prevent the leak, that type of leak that occurred at Aliso Canyon, hopefully. And then there's testing and monitoring requirements, and requirement for have an emergency response plan in case of, again, some sort of a emergency situation. And then our agency is already looking into requirements to adopt a rule to address underground storage tanks. We're looking at a similar type of approach, first of all, 1148.1 relative to complaints relative to odors and nuisance and mitigation measures. We also are looking to possibly have some fence line monitoring associated with these sites for methane, and different types of leak detection, whether it's the handheld organic vapor analyzers or the infrared cameras be used. We're also looking at some public notification and communication requirements, and the present schedule is to bring this to the board in fall of this year. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Could you explain again this situation where you have the outer casing and the inner center pipe? I didn't quite get what you said. They were going to eliminate that, or what are they going to do with that?
Sure. The way these wells were constructed, and some of them were are old, 78 years old wells. There is a center tubing that extends all the way down to these, like Aliso Canyon case, 8,500 feet down below. There is, and that's a 3-inch or 2.78.
Like this.
Then there is, yeah.
Drawing, but I didn't get.
Then there's a casing around it. The casing is also metal, and it has some mud around it that solidifies, kind of like concrete, that holds it. And that casing is bigger diameter. It's 7 inches, so it's almost twice as big in diameter, which makes it 4 times larger in terms of the volume. And the casing was not, at least in my view, wasn't intended for be used for injection and withdrawal of the gas. It was to protect the center tubing. But as there is a need, for example, in the summertime, if there is a high demand on electricity, the Aliso Canyon supplies 40% of all the gas that goes to LADWP and 60% to all the other power plants that are within the CAL-ISO jurisdiction. And if there is a need to get more gas on a spare of the moment, by using the outer casing, they're able to withdraw the gas faster than just the inner tubing. So the new regulations is going to limit the ability to withdraw and inject gas using the outer casing. And again, this is not adopted yet, but that's one of the areas they're looking into. And by doing that, then if there is a leak in the tubing, at least the outer casing will maintain that leak and doesn't automatically get it into the soil, which was what happened in the Aliso case.
Because at the time of the leak, they were using the entire casing. They were using the casing as
There's
the.
an investigation that is
Okay.
ongoing at this point. I don't think they've concluded the investigation, but that's one of the suspicions.
But
That
the outer casing had failed, right? That was-
the outer casing was the one that failed. So there was about 500 feet down, there was some sort of a crack or failure that caused the gas to be then coming out of the outer casing and into the ground. And there is typically at the bottom of these wells, and I like Dr. Liu's definition, if this is the inner tubing and then the casing is the wider well around it, there's actually a blockage that prevents from underground, very bottom, that prevents the gas to come into the outer casing. But they also have they call it a safety valve, but it's actually like a sliding valve that if you lift it, there's some perforated areas at the bottom of this well that if you need to do a testing, instead of just withdrawing gas from the underground tank, you can lift this valve and let some of the gas come into the casing and pull a sample from the casing. According to some of the statements made, and again, we're not in charge of below ground, so I can't verify this, that this safety valve was lifted but was for some reason not working, so it was never put back in. So that means that the gas can actually come up to the tubing, and as soon as it passes this blockage, it'll come into the casing as well. And that's, I think, part of the reason why there was gas coming from both casing and the tubing, and that came, when it broke, it came out. There is another 11-inch casing that is even bigger, that's around the 7-inch casing, but that doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. It usually goes in maybe a few hundred feet below ground, and then it stops.
And then did I understand correctly from the presentation that at present we do not control methane from these gas wells? We do not monitor or control it. We have no regulations that covers it. Is that right?
We, except for if they, similar to the Aliso, if the release of the gas from these wells cause a public nuisance, then we have authority to regulate it. But our prohibitory rules, which public nuisance is one of them, applies. Our source-specific rules presently do not always apply to methane. So we are trying to amend the rules to make that requirement subject to our
We're not
rules.
prohibited from regulating, it's just that we don't have anything on it.
Right, no, we're not prohibited, and I think Kenneth and Barbara should weigh in.
We can regulate air contaminants.
So right now, we're looking at rule amendments but more in terms of the potential for public nuisance, like we did in 1148.1, but also in terms of the VOC emissions that often come with the methane as well. So we have to be careful because CARB's in the middle regulation, DOGGR's in the middle regulation, EPA just released their regulations. We don't want to have too much overlap or contradictions there, so that's why our rulemaking is going a little slow, because we need to see where they're headed as well and see where we can complement it and not contradict it.
So on the Montebello site, it's supposedly decommissioned, but it's still working. Are they going to shut it down completely, or what's going to be the trajectory for that?
So it's, from the standpoint of storing gas underground, it is already shut down. They're not allowed to store gas underground. But when the way these underground storage facilities work, they call it a working capacity. That's the amount of gas that they, if it's a running site, that they put into the underground storage cavity, and then they withdraw it as they need it. But in order to be able to withdraw this gas, because it has to be under pressure, otherwise it takes much longer and more power to get it out. There's actually what's like a simple example is your springboard and mattress on top of it. There's another, like at Aliso, there's at least been told about 70 million cubic feet gas underneath that it actually used as a springboard that pushes the gas up when you need to pull it out. So in Montebello, I'm not sure how much gas is left in the bottom, but it is not under pressure, and or it is not under high pressure. And in order to withdraw all of the gas, when you pull it out, it comes up with a lot of liquid, whether it's water or oil, and they have to separate that out. So when you ask me if it's shut down, there is still some oil production taking place, because as they pull this out, they get some oil out of it. So that site is still being used for that reason, but they're not used for storage of gas and withdrawal of gas anymore. And I believe there is a representative from SoCal Gas in the audience. If during public comment you would care to have
So
direct.
one thing that's I noticed is that these storage facilities are often very near residential. They're right under them or they're next to them. So I just, I guess that's because of historically that this was an oil producing region and that's where those ended up being. And nobody's complained about it over these years until we had Aliso. So I think that's something we need to pay attention to.
So there's a couple of reasons for that, in addition to just that these oil production sites look like good sites to store gas, natural gas. You may have heard there is a above ground LPG, liquefied petroleum gas storage site in San Pedro that the residents are very, very concerned about. So no, this is an existing one. This is Rancho, not a Rancho, or what's the name of that site? San Pedro. Where is Jim? Rancho LPG. Thank you. It's Rancho LPG. So you don't want to store natural gas in any type of a large vessel, especially after 9/11. That could be a potential explosive hazard. And then because the infrastructure, the gas pipeline, is not built from whenever they built the transmission lines in such a way that you can have large quantities of gas withdrawn or passed through, and the travel time is much slower than electricity. So it doesn't, if you need more gas in one day, like if you have a high electricity demand and there is threats of rolling blackouts, you say, okay, pump me more gas from Texas or Louisiana. It doesn't get here for another 3 days probably, so it's not going to help you that way. You can't wheel it in that quickly. So for those reasons, these sites are, first, they have to find the proper site to store it, but it has to be near population densities too. You can't have it way out in the desert and say, when I need it, I'll pull it in. Kind of like power plants in a way.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Oh, the other thing was, looking at your charts, there's a very, looks to me, and maybe I'm not reading the charts right, it looks like there's a high volume of leakage, both from valves and from the pipes themselves. That's a concern, I think. I mean, apparently, either that's from lack of maintenance or something that's going on that you see that kind of percentage of leakage in these. So that's just something we should be looking at, I think. If we're gonna regulate this, let's look at that part of the supply chain of this gas.
The CARB regulation and the EPA regulation are focused specifically on those types of leaks and the methane that could come out of those types of leaks. But as we found in Aliso Canyon, it might be 1% to 2% VOCs in that methane as well. So we would have that. We're concerned about the greenhouse gas aspect, but we're also concerned about the VOC releases in terms of potential toxic impacts if it's near a community, or as well as ozone formation. So we're trying to complement these other regulations where we can, and maybe add some monitoring requirements and ambient monitoring requirements and some more steps on the way to a potential nuisance, rather than just wait till it gets to be a nuisance.
For comparison's sake, I mean, these leaks that we've detected are worse than the leaks we find at refineries, chemical plants, because those are typically subject to a quarterly inspection and repair, and as they find these leaks, they repair them. We have historically not had that requirement for gas wells, natural gas wells. But in terms of what was happening at Aliso, I mean, they're nowhere near those types of release levels. I mean, they're like less than 1% of what was coming out of Aliso. So it's not, and sometimes, you know, when the JPL and ARB were doing these overhead flights to identify how much is still leaking, these are not the kind of leaks that they'll detect by just flying over. And it's sometimes hard with even infrared camera, but if they're large leaks, we do detect them with infrared camera. So it's leaks that needs to be repaired, but it's not like significantly contributing to greenhouse gas at this point. But when you put them all together, maybe they do.
Has raised a question with forming. I assume that the VOCs that may be coming out are VTEX because of the oil and gas. And I mean, is it possible to have quantities of that create, you know, health risk issues that we have to be concerned about?
Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? Probably not, because we've measured benzene and VTEX at Aliso on almost fence line levels, and we didn't detect high concentrations even with that amount of leak. One thing about methane is it's lighter than air, so when it's released, it goes straight up. Question is if it has other VOCs with it, do they all act the same way? We think they do, but you know, there's some other school of thoughts that they think, well, only the methane goes straight up. The other VOCs maybe linger around and not go straight up as much.
Well, yeah. They're volatile by nature. And
they're all volatile. Yeah, exactly.
That's why they're called VOCs to begin with.
Right.
Any other questions? Sean, any questions?
No, thank you.
Public comment? Going once, going twice? All right.
See, now what am I going to do?
Yeah, geez. All right, with that, our next item is just a written report. Any other business by the committee members that we need to hear on this subcommittee?
Just that I'd like to hear back from our staff, if you're going to develop regulations, I assume you're going to bring in your periodic.
Yeah, it's going to come back to you.
Okay.
All right, any other public comment?
We do our meeting, our call next week now?
Sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd like to.
That just saved me a half hour next week. Great.
Okay, very good. All right, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
And our next meeting is on June 17th.
Yep.
So Joe wants to meet now.